All right, now that you have everything set up, you have to decide what type of sheath you're going to make, whether you're going to make a mask that just flips over the top and snaps, or whether you're going to add a strap that either buckles or snaps. And one thing to consider is that when you're making a mask, they tend to work better with an axe that has a longer beard. That way they can't easily just be pulled right off. This doesn't have much of a beard down here, and I'm afraid that there would be a lot of wiggle room if I just make a mask style. So I'm gonna go ahead and use a strap and then snap it out here in the front, which means this is gonna be pretty easy. I'm just gonna trace around the bit here. Leave yourself some room for a welt because you're gonna add some space there. Decide how far back you wanna go. I like to comfortably be able to carry the axe with the mask on. The sheath on without my knuckles interfering with it. So I'm going to stop it right around there somewhere. Doesn't have to be that precise yet, just getting an idea. That's pretty much it. So I could just flip the axe over and trace the other side, or I could cut this out and flip it over, and that'll serve as the other side. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and just make this straight here, I think. Something like that. That's it, nothing fancy. I'm gonna make 2 of those. You also need to make sure that this isn't too long up here where you can't get that beard down in there. See, that might be a little bit of a problem. You see how that might not slip in there? So we might need to do something more like this. You could always do that, which will give you some space to slip that in there. That steel might be a little bit of a problem. This is why you do this on paper first. You don't want to be cutting out of leather and then whittling away the leather. You can do that a little, but better to get it right here or close here. Yeah, that's better. You want it as tight as you can have it, but you definitely don't want to get impatient when you're doing this, which is often what I do. I tend to work pretty quickly and then you pay for it in the end. So that's what we're looking at. One little trick here that I like to do, because I've messed it up before, is I'll write inside on this. That way I know whenever I'm tracing this on to the leather that this should be the suede side and this should be the skin side. You screw that up, then your patterns get flipped upside down and it's frustrating because you just wasted leather. So now I need the outside of this. So basically, I'm just gonna flip this over, retrace it, cut it out. All right, so that's that side, that's that side. Yeah, I should have left a little bit more room for the welt, I think. You always think like 3/4 of an inch is enough, but the time you fold it around there, you lose a lot of it. So once you get your pattern cut out, I'll deal with the strap later. You have to decide what type of leather you're going to use. I have a full half hide of pre-dyed leather, but that means that you can't change the color. This is just a like 16 by 12 inch slice of veg tan leather, and it's probably about a 7 to 8 ounce, and I find that's about the best. My half hide is like 8 to 9 ounce, and it's thick, it's hard to work with. 7 to 8 seems to be right in the ballpark for sheaths and for sheaths, knife sheaths and axe sheaths. So remember now, I'm going to trace this right onto the leather. I want to use as little of it as I can, so I want to get these as close as I can. But this means inside up, which means you're better off if you can, I think. Though you do want to make sure your surface is clean underneath, because when you throw this down, anything that's underneath can imprint itself into the leather at this point. It's so soft, and it could get dirty and affect the way your leather dyes. That's the downside of untanned veg tan leather, is you have to do the dyeing yourself if you want to change the color, and inconsistency in leather will drive you nuts. And don't throw these pieces away. You can use those to test snaps on and stuff. There's uses for those, so don't toss those out. Now that you got it traced, you got to cut it out, and you want a good sharp knife. I'm going to go ahead and actually bust that off and use a new X-Acto knife here. You don't have to try to cut all the way through at one time, but 7 to 8 ounce leather, I find it is easier to just do that. Definitely want to keep your hands out of the way here. The knife can slip very easily and end up going right through your hand. All right, now that we have our two pieces, go ahead and line them up and see how close they are to being the same. It's okay if they're not quite the same because we're gonna trim all this later. See, I got a little bit of excess up here, but we'll take care of that on the sander. So looks good. Let's go ahead and bevel what edges we're gonna bevel. All right, now that we have all of our pieces, we need to decide which edges of this we wanna bevel. It just makes a little bit cleaner of an edge. You don't wanna bevel the inside of your welt edge because that will leave a gap when you glue it all together, and you don't wanna bevel your welt. So we can put those to the side for now. I do wanna bevel the outsides of these though. And probably the inside of this. And it's easier to do that now before you dye it. You need to pick a size of beveler. If you just had a knife, you could do this with a knife. This just makes it quicker and cleaner. I don't really care about the size. I'm just gonna use a number 3 because it's here and there's nothing to that. You just take the tool and clean up the sides. It hides a lot of crimes too. Your cuts aren't quite straight. This makes them look pretty. It's kind of like putting grout in tile. Just the outsides of the edges that you're going to glue together, not the inside. But where the axe goes in here, just to keep that a little cleaner, I'm going to go ahead and bevel that flesh side as well. Almost forgot, I need to make the strap. It doesn't matter how wide or thin you make it, it's kind of up to you. I'm going to make it the whole length of this. It's longer than I need, but I'll decide how long it needs to be afterwards. Yeah, got to be wide enough to take the snap, obviously. I don't know, that looks good enough for me. Here's another reason you want to save extra scraps of leather. I want to round the end that the snap's going to go on. I have these tools for that. If you don't, no big deal, you can cut it by hand. I'm not going to get that particular. I'm just going to line it up and smack it through. There we go. All right, there are two types of dye. There are your water-based dyes and then your oil-based dyes. These pretty much suck, except black. Black is the easiest one to get a uniform finish. I want to try red, so I'm going to use this Pro oil-based dye. There are also two ways of dyeing it. There are dab dyeing, where you get a little wool dauber or something and rub it on. And then there's dip dyeing, which is when you pour the dye into a container and then actually dip the pieces in, pull them out, and let them dye. I think you get the best finish when you dip dye, but you kind of waste a lot of dye. I'm not that concerned about this, and I want to see how well the Pro dye with a bright color will dab dye, so that's what I'm going to do. It's nice to have something to set these on or lean these up against when you're done, so I'm going to lean them up against this. Killinger has a little cookie tray that he uses, or like a cookie wire rack. That's brilliant. I got to get one of those for here. Probably should put gloves on for this. You could put this together and then dye it. I've done that. It's just hard to get dye on the inside then. Some folks argue that you don't get a good glue up when you dye this. I've never had any problems with it either way, so you do whatever you think is best here. Tried it both ways. Some people say you should go in small circles. Other people suggest you just get the dye on there as quickly and uniformly as you can. I just kind of do whatever seems to work the best. That's what one coat looks like. And then I just immediately put on a second. It won't absorb so fast. It'll give you some time to get that in there all at once. That seems to be the key, just consistency all around. Not necessarily which direction you go or how you rub it on. I'm okay with that. I'm going to let them dry. This is where I get impatient. You should really let that dry for, God, if you had time to let it dry overnight, that would be ideal, but at least an hour. And I just get impatient, so I'm gonna go do something else and then come back and see how wet they are. All right, it's been an hour. You should definitely wait longer. but I'm impatient and I want to get this glued up. So, barge cement, the best, some kind of contact cement. I have tried super glue, it just doesn't work as good. I'm gonna go ahead and rough this up just a little bit. Just to give it a little more tooth. So you can't just, I suppose you could, but we meant to put this on all sides that you're gonna stick this to, and then let it dry until it's like just a touch tacky. It shouldn't be wet. Spread it out good. Make sure you get contact everywhere, or cement everywhere. We're not gonna glue the strap, we'll put that in with rivets. I'm not gonna stitch this. You have to make that choice whether you're gonna stitch or not. Stitching takes a lot longer. It's more of an aesthetic thing, honestly. Glue with rivets is just as strong, if not stronger. In fact, I would argue that it's stronger. Those speed rivets, which I'm gonna use, they do come loose though, I gotta admit, but I have a sheath that's just glued with a rivet on either end, and I've never had any issue with it. So you get it glued up good and the glue will hold. All right, now we gotta let that dry. You can run a hairdryer on it if you want. I often do because I'm impatient. All right, it's been about 10 minutes here. We're gonna go ahead and stick these guys together. Remember, go ahead and leave the welt a little bit proud. You can take care of that later. All right, so that's that. Now, like I said, you could dye it now, and that has some advantages because I do gotta clean this up, but you do want to dye the edges before you burnish it. It seems hard to get dye to soak down in after you burnish it. So I'm gonna let this dry for a second, and then I'll take it over to the sander. I'll clean up my edges, and then if I need to, I'll re-bevel anything that needs re-beveling. And we're about ready to go ahead and knock some rivets in. All right, I just kind of eyeballed them there. Now we're gonna go ahead and get these punched out. Let's see what they sent us here. We got the die to set those. You'll need this, and then this is your punch right here. And you want to keep that as flat as you can. Use your backup leather strip there. Just give her a smack just to make sure it's going to work. Give it a push. That's one thing you gotta be careful of. I do that often. I hit too hard and mark the leather. All right, didn't turn out too bad here. Now I need to attach the strap, and I think I'm gonna use a Chicago screw back here, and then obviously out here I need a snap. I believe I'm gonna use black snaps and Chicago screws. I just think it will add another dimension there. So let me get that sorted and see what that looks like. I do wanna wet this strap first. That'll allow it to stretch a little bit more. That way when it shrinks, and it will a little, it'll be nice and tight when I put the snap on. You can even, I'm gonna secure it back here first. Obviously I gotta make sure I don't make too much. Same idea as the back side. Here's the difference. Rather than put this right there in the center of that, I'm gonna cheat it forward just a little bit. That way I have to really stretch that strap, and it keeps this on nice and tight. But this one is just gonna be right where I need it to go. Is this gonna be big enough for that? I think. See how much easier these work? There we go. Moment of truth. Dicey, dicey. Nice and tight. See how I made that just a little bit short? That way I'm gonna wet form it tonight and it snaps and that thing don't move at all. That's what I like in a sheath. I'm gonna burnish the edges, wet form it, call it a day. All right, now we're gonna burnish the edges, which just means to smooth or slick this out. The easiest way is just to use a slicker or a piece of wood, a little bit of water, and it's not so much about pressure, it's more about speed. So you want to go back and forth really quickly like that. And you can see the difference, I think, already. Just that little bit slicks the edge compared to that. Or you can use some of this, which you can find on eBay. I like this stuff. It seems to just glue it down and makes it a little bit more glassy when it's done. Just a little bit. Do small sections. You don't want to do large sections. And you just want to take the notch that it best fits in, back and forth. I actually enjoy this process. But if you don't, take a little bit of that and put it on there and then make something like this. That you can do this. But I'm telling you, you don't get as good of a result. These work better than anything I've used. Still drying, but you guys can see that Obenauf's really pulls out that color. It will look more like this when it dries. This is still drying here, so we'll all even up to that consistency. And that came out really nice. I'm happy with that.